Long before telescopes traced the first threads of distant starlight, there existed a civilization that saw the cosmos with astonishing clarity. Not through lenses or mirrors, but through observation, ritual, and the architecture of the sky itself. Imagine a society whose monuments align with celestial bodies, whose myths encode planetary cycles, whose understanding of the heavens predates modern astronomy. The question that grips the mind is simple yet profound. How could humans with no telescopic instruments perceive the cosmos so accurately? This is not a tale of superstition or coincidence, but of a culture that integrated the sky into the very fabric of cognition, society, and survival. To explore this is to confront the limits of human perception, the ingenuity of collective cognition, and the subtle ways that history encodes knowledge. It is also a meditation on the relationship between stress, adaptation, and insight. When humans are confronted with vast, unpredictable systems like the night sky, our brains seek patterns, connections, and meaning. Our perception, though limited in scope, excels at integration when honed over generations of cultural practice. This civilization demonstrates how cognitive frameworks, social cooperation, and environmental pressures converge to produce profound understanding, even without modern tools. Archaeologists and historians suggest this society tracked lunar cycles, solstices, planetary conjunctions, and anticipated eclipses with remarkable accuracy. Their monuments, massive stones, carefully aligned pyramids, and circular enclosures act as externalized memory systems, akin to a distributed neural network. Each stone, each angle, each shadow cast at sunrise or sunset represents a node in a vast informational web. The collective brain of this civilization was externalized into stone and earth, allowing knowledge to persist across generations. There is a psychological elegance in this design. Humans often overestimate the necessity of complex instruments and underestimate the capacity of structured social systems. When stress is applied, whether from seasonal scarcity, migration pressures, or celestial unpredictability, the group responds by reinforcing patterns, rituals, and knowledge networks. It is precisely through these constraints that insight emerges. One can view their monuments not just as cultural artifacts, but as stress-testing mechanisms for collective cognition, scaffolding the perception of cycles. Consider the alignments. Certain temples mark the rising of the sun on the solstice. Others track the phases of the moon, the movements of Venus, even the apparent retrograde motion of Mars. To modern eyes, it may appear miraculous, yet it is the product of meticulous observation, communal record-keeping, and encoded ritual. Each generation added layers of verification and correction, a process not unlike neural learning, where error signals refine prediction models. One might ask, why would a society invest so heavily in observing the sky? The answer lies at the intersection of survival and cosmology. Seasonal cycles dictate agricultural planning. Lunar phases influence tides and fishing schedules. Planetary cycles may inform myth and governance. But beyond practical utility, there is a psychological dimension. Observation of the cosmos provides a framework for meaning, a stabilizing pattern in an unpredictable world. It enhances social cohesion, aligns collective action, and serves as a mirror for human cognition itself. We tend to think of astronomy as a modern, instrument-driven science. Yet here we encounter an elegant paradox. Understanding does not always require technology, but structure, attention, and transmission of knowledge. The rituals, the myths, the monuments, they are cognitive prosthetics, extending perception beyond the biological limits of the human eye. One could liken this to the way neurons in the brain form assemblies that detect temporal and spatial patterns. The society's architecture encodes temporal sequences just as neuronal assemblies encode temporal correlations. Shadows cast on a particular day may trigger ritual action, ensuring that knowledge and behavior co-evolve. It is a system designed for resilience, capable of preserving insight over centuries. These people may have understood precession, the slow wobble of the Earth's axis, through careful long-term observation. Though they lacked telescopes, the repetition of cycles, recorded in architecture and legend, allowed an implicit awareness of celestial drift over generations. They were, in effect, measuring time on a scale that dwarfs a single human lifespan, leveraging cultural memory as an instrument. The philosophical implications are profound. They reveal that intelligence is not merely individual but distributed across networks of people, artifacts, and environment. Knowledge is a dynamic, self-correcting system where each observation reinforces the cognitive architecture of the collective. From a psychological standpoint, the human brain is exquisitely sensitive to patterns, yet limited in scope. Social structures and material culture act as amplifiers, enabling the mind to perceive dimensions that would otherwise be inaccessible. In this context, the distinction between mythology and empirical observation blurs. Stories of gods and celestial beings may simultaneously encode calendars, planetary motion, and ecological wisdom. The narrative becomes an algorithm, the myth a heuristic, guiding behavior while preserving information across generations. For example, some texts and carvings align with the cycles of Venus, encoding its appearance as morning and evening star, reflecting both observation and cultural significance. This dual encoding, practical and symbolic, reinforces memory and perception. It is an elegant solution to a cognitive problem: how to perceive and act upon patterns that exceed the lifespan of an individual. By embedding knowledge into social ritual and monument, the society externalizes memory, creating a feedback loop between observation, action, and cultural reinforcement. This is a lesson in adaptation and collective intelligence. Our brains evolved to navigate complex, uncertain environments, but they are constrained by temporal and sensory limits. Culture, tools, and social organization extend those limits, creating emergent intelligence. The ancient culture that tracked stars without telescopes exemplifies this principle, demonstrating how constraints can catalyze innovation and insight. There is also a neuropsychological dimension. Humans experience a deep satisfaction when recognizing patterns, when mapping chaos into order. Observing the stars, anticipating celestial events, and encoding them into ritual and architecture likely stimulated cognitive reward systems, reinforcing learning and social cohesion. It is a profound illustration of how cultural practice and brain chemistry co-evolve. Their monuments can thus be read as inscriptions of attention and care, as records of human capacity to model complex systems mentally and collectively. These systems are robust because they are distributed. One alignment may fail, but the overall network persists. Knowledge is encoded redundantly across myths, architecture, and ritual, buffering against loss. If we examine specific cases, such as certain circular stone structures aligned with solstices, the precision is remarkable. Anthropologists calculate that some alignments deviate by mere degrees from modern astronomical measurements. Without optics or modern mathematics, such accuracy is achieved through observation, communal validation, and iterative refinement, a process akin to scientific method operating over centuries rather than years. One might wonder, could this be coincidence? The patterns are too consistent and pervasive to attribute to chance. The culture's understanding is a product of disciplined observation, cognitive scaffolding, and cultural encoding. It is the outcome of sustained, collective attention. The twist here is subtle yet profound. In a sense, the society's seeming vulnerability, reliance on memory, ritual, and shared attention was its greatest strength. What appears as limitation is, in fact, an adaptive strategy. By distributing knowledge across people and material culture, the system became resilient to individual error, mortality, and environmental stress. Their apparent simplicity masks a sophisticated understanding of systems, cycles, and collective cognition. The lesson extends to our contemporary world. In an era dominated by technology, it is easy to forget that knowledge and insight can be encoded in patterns, rituals, and community structures. The ancient observers of the sky relied on social networks, iterative observation, and cognitive scaffolding to perceive phenomena far beyond individual capacity. They teach us that intelligence is not solely located in instruments, but in networks, human, material, and conceptual. One can imagine a day in that civilization. A group gathers at dawn, observing the horizon as shadows stretch and align with markers set centuries before. Children learn the cycles as stories. Elders verify the positions. The community acts in synchrony with celestial patterns. Every ritual, every festival, every stone alignment is a node in a cognitive map spanning generations. The sky becomes a canvas upon which society projects its understanding of time, order, and meaning. The philosophical resonance is clear. Humans are both observers and participants in complex systems. Perception is shaped by constraints, and adaptation emerges from interaction with both environment and community. Stress, far from being purely destructive, becomes a catalyst for structured attention, pattern recognition, and collective insight. Even today, we underestimate the capacity of structured attention. Modern neuroscience reveals that the brain excels in pattern detection. Yet it requires scaffolding, repetition, and social reinforcement to reach its potential. The ancient culture provides a historical case study of these principles in action. Their achievements challenge the linear narrative of technological progress, reminding us that deep understanding can precede instruments, that cognition distributed over society and time can rival modern observation in elegance and accuracy. This perspective reframes our conception of intelligence, creativity, and the nature of scientific observation. We often imagine telescopes as the necessary prerequisite for astronomical insight, yet here is evidence that social, cultural, and cognitive tools can achieve comparable ends. It is a humbling lesson in humility, ingenuity, and the adaptive potential of human societies. The sky, in this sense, becomes both teacher and mirror. By mapping the heavens, humans map themselves, their collective attention, their ability to encode experience, and their capacity to extend cognition beyond biological limits. We see how rituals, myths, and architecture are not superfluous, but integral components of epistemology. Every solstice alignment, every lunar observation, every encoded myth is a signal in a vast system of collective intelligence. To observe, encode, transmit, and correct is to participate in an emergent knowledge network spanning generations. We can also see parallels with contemporary neuroscience. The way memory is distributed in social and material systems mirrors distributed representations in the brain. Nodes of information, connected through patterns of attention and feedback, allow prediction, adaptation, and error correction. This ancient culture effectively externalized neural computation across society, leveraging redundancy, ritual, and observation to overcome individual limitations. And yet there is wonder here, not the wonder of mystical speculation, but of cognitive and social elegance. The capacity of human systems to model complex, distant phenomena, to encode them in material and cultural networks, is extraordinary. It reminds us that intelligence is not confined to individuals, nor is technology the only path to insight. It can emerge from structure, discipline, and the interplay of attention across generations. In conclusion, the civilization that knew the stars without telescopes teaches a subtle yet profound lesson. It illustrates the interplay between individual cognition, collective intelligence, and environmental observation. It demonstrates how perceived limitations, biological, technological, or temporal, can catalyze adaptation and insight. It challenges us to reconsider the sources of knowledge and the mechanisms of perception, revealing the deep sophistication of human culture long before the invention of lenses and mirrors. The sky was both a canvas and a clock, a guide and a mirror, and the people who observed it were, in essence, early architects of cognition itself. The philosophical implication resonates deeply. Human understanding is distributed, emergent, and resilient. Patterns exist in nature, but only through attention, observation, and structured transmission do they become meaningful. Knowledge is encoded not just in books or instruments, but in ritual, in architecture, in the collective rhythms of human society. And so, as we gaze at the cosmos today through telescopes and satellites, it is humbling to remember that our ancestors were already reading the heavens. Without optics, without instruments relying solely on observation, social memory, and disciplined attention. Their legacy reminds us that intelligence is not just technological, but cultural, cognitive, and profoundly human. As you reflect on this, consider what invisible structures, what distributed networks of knowledge exist in your own society today, quietly encoding insight, resilience, and understanding. How might the practices, rituals, and patterns around you serve as cognitive extensions, amplifying your perception of complex systems? If this journey into the mind, culture, and cognition of an ancient sky-watching civilization resonated with you, explore the patterns in your own world. Question the assumptions of progress and remember that intelligence, adaptation, and insight often emerge where we least expect them. If you found this exploration enlightening, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, hit like if it sparked your curiosity, and subscribe to Past Lens for more deep dives into the hidden wisdom of history. The stars were once written in stone, now let history illuminate your mind.